Chapter 1, Calculated Risk. The Nightingale, designation medical transport 774 Bravo, sliced through the void, a utilitarian scarab against the star-peppered black. Inside, the recycled air hummed, a low thrum vibrating through the deck plates. Captain Eva Rostova stood planted on the bridge, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the swirling nebula forecast displayed on the main view screen. It depicted a roiling mess of charged particles and gravitational eddies, the shortcut's price. Route confirmation, Giant. Rostova's voice was gravel, smoothed by years of command but retaining its edge. Jian Li, strapped into the pilot's couch, wiped sweat from his temple, his fingers dancing across the console. Confirmed, Captain. Course laid in. Entry vector to the mold perimeter in 60 minutes. Exit trajectory calculated. Contingent on minimal gravitational shear. His voice held a tremor he couldn't quite suppress. Contingent, Rostova echoed flatly. Minimal shear in a junkyard the size of a small moon. Comforting. She turned, her boots clicking softly on the metal grating. Brick status. Security Chief Marcus Cole, nicknamed Brick, for reasons obvious to anyone who saw his blocky frame and the heavy mining claw grafted onto his right arm, leaned against the bulkhead near the tactical display. External sensors are clean for now. Internal sweep green. Lena's still babying the engines. They need babying, Lena Petrova's voice piped up over the internal comm, slightly distorted. The plasma conduits are running hotter than spec since that asteroid field near Cygnus X1, pushing them through the mold's interference. It's asking a lot. Rostova pinched the bridge of her nose. Asking is cheaper than the detour, Lena. 3 days cheaper, that matters. She walked toward the rear of the small bridge, pausing at the reinforced hatch leading deeper into the ship. Quint, how's our passenger? The hatch hissed open, revealing Dr. Ilara Quint. She wore sterile blue overalls, her expression tightly controlled, though her eyes darted constantly toward the readouts embedded in the wall beside her. The air around her seemed colder, carrying the faint, sterile tang of cryopreservation fluid. Stable, Quint reported, her voice precise, clinical. Cryo unit functions nominal. Temperature steady at -196 Celsius. Biometric signatures within acceptable parameters. She smoothed a non-existent crease on her overalls. The container's integrity is paramount, Captain. This region, the debris fields, the potential impacts. The container is shielded, Doctor. Rostova cut her off, not unkindly. Best shielding credits can buy. Brick can attest. Brick grunted affirmation. Double-layered ablative plating, internal gyroscopic stabilizers. Took a micrometeoroid hit last year, didn't even scratch the inner shell. Quint nodded stiffly, unconvinced. She glanced toward the secure compartment where the cryo unit hummed, a low, resonant sound that seemed to anchor the ship. Inside that container lay the reason for this rushed, dangerous detour: pristine, gene-matched organs. Lungs, a heart, kidneys, liver, irreplaceable. Destined for a recipient whose life depended on the Nightingale arriving on schedule. Quint's hand unconsciously tightened into a fist. She knew the recipient's file intimately. A child. 60 minutes to perimeter, Giant announced, his voice tight. Rostova turned back to the view screen. The nebula forecast shifted, showing predicted debris densities. Red clusters indicated high-impact risk zones. Their plotted course skirted the worst of it, a thin green line threading through chaos. Helm, engage maneuvering thrusters. Prepare for debris field navigation. Lena, give me stable power. Focus on shields forward. Aye, Captain, Lena's voice replied, strained. Brick, active scans. Anything bigger than a clenched fist, I want to see it. Scanning, Brick confirmed, his good hand tapping commands onto his console. The mining claw flexed reflexively. The Nightingale adjusted course, its small thrusters firing in precise bursts. Outside, the first tentative fingers of the great orbital necropolis became visible, not as distinct shapes, but as a thickening of the starfield, a place where light seemed hesitant to tread. Distant glints hinted at immense structures, tumbling end over end in silent slow motion. Wreckage. Kilometers of it. Dr. Quint remained near the cryobay hatch, her posture rigid. She ran diagnostic checks on the container remotely via her datapad, her brow furrowed. Every flicker on the screen, every minute shift in the ship's vibration seemed to amplify her anxiety. She pulled up the container's internal monitors. Temperature, pressure, biosignatures, all green, still green. She forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly. Professionalism was a shield. The ship shuddered. A low clang resonated through the hull. Minor impact, Jayan reported, his voice sharp. Deflected by shields, debris density increasing. Acknowledged, Ristova said calmly. Maintain course. The viewscreen now showed a panorama of wreckage. Twisted spars of metal drifted alongside ruptured hulls leaking frozen atmosphere. Chunks of composite material, scarred by re-entry or weapons fire, tumbled past. Looming in the distance were the true behemoths, the husks of bioships. Vast, organic-looking structures, their external carapaces resembling bone or chitin, pocked with craters and rents. Some pulsed with faint, residual light, sickly greens and blues emanating from deep within their rotting superstructures. This was the ship mold. Picking up faint energy signatures, Brick announced, leaning closer to his display. Multiple sources, low power, consistent with derelict systems, or scavengers. Ristova's jaw tightened. Magnify sector Gamma 7. The viewscreen zoomed, resolving a cluster of smaller wrecks orbiting a colossal, slug-like bioship carcass. Shapes darted between the debris, too small, too erratic for automated drones. Life signs, Ristova asked. Hard to say. Interference is high. Could be residual bioactivity from the wrecks. Could be occupants. Brick's tone was grim. Standard mold protocols apply. Assume hostile. Navigation. Plot a course deviation. Maximum possible distance from Gamma 7 without entering the higher density fields, Ristova ordered. Adjusting, Jayan confirmed, knuckles white on the controls. It'll add 20 minutes to our transit. Acceptable losses, Ristova muttered. Another shudder, harder this time. An alarm blared briefly before Lena silenced it. Aft shield generator took a hit. Minor overload, recycling now. We brushed something. Fleshy. Fleshy, Quint repeated, stepping fully onto the bridge. Brick pointed at a side monitor displaying sensor logs. Biomass reading on the object. Large. Probably a chunk torn off one of the big ones. He zoomed in on a fuzzy image, a drifting mass of what looked like pale, rubbery tissue interwoven with metallic filaments. It tumbled away into the darkness. The ship navigated the thickening soup of wreckage. Silence descended on the bridge, broken only by the hum of machinery and Giant's occasional course corrections. Minutes stretched thin. The Nightingale moved like a nervous fish through a predator-filled reef. Quint found herself holding her breath, watching the cryo unit readouts obsessively. Stable, stable. The word became a mantra. She visualized the delivery, the successful transplant, the message confirming mission accomplished. It was the only thing keeping the oppressive weight of the mold at bay. Movement, Brick snapped, startling everyone. Multiple contacts converging fast. They were hiding in the bioship's sensor shadow. On the tactical display, red icons blossomed, accelerating towards the Nightingale from the direction of Gamma 7. They were small, agile craft, weaving through the debris with practiced ease. Evasive maneuvers, Rostova barked. Lena, give me everything you've got on shields and engines. Brick, weapons systems online, target identifiers. No registry, custom builds, scavenger configuration, Brick reported, his cybernetic hand blurring over the controls. The ship's single forward laser cannon turret whined as it deployed. They're broadcasting. Demands. A harsh, electronically filtered voice crackled over the external speakers, overriding the bridge audio. Medical Transport 774 Bravo. Heave to. Prepare to be boarded. Surrender the cargo. Comply and survival is negotiable. Negotiable, Rostova spat. Giant, get us out of here. The Nightingale surged forward, engines straining. Laser fire stitched across the void as Brick targeted the closest pursuer. One scavenger vessel jinked wildly, its shields flaring. The others didn't falter. They're launching boarding pods, Giant shouted, wrestling with the controls as proximity alarms screamed. Impact imminent, Brick yelled. A jarring collision slammed through the ship, throwing Quint against the bulkhead. Metal screamed in protest. Red emergency lights flickered on, casting the bridge in an infernal glow. Alarms wailed insistently. Hull breach, Sector 4. Life support failing in cargo access corridor. Lena's voice was tight with panic. Another impact rocked the Nightingale, closer this time. Heavy magnetic clamps resonated through the hull. Boarding party away, the filtered voice announced, laced with cold satisfaction. The Nashers have arrived. Your cargo belongs to us now. Quint scrambled upright, her heart pounding against her ribs. She stared at the cryobay hatch, her datapad clutched in a white-knuckled grip. The readouts were still green, stable. But outside that reinforced door, the nightmare had just begun. The organ scavengers were here. Chapter 2, Zero-G Predators. The shriek of tearing metal echoed through the Nightingale's corridors. Emergency lights painted everything in stark, pulsating crimson. Gravity, already artificial and prone to fluctuations, flickered off completely for a terrifying second before the backup generators kicked in, restoring a semblance of normalcy. Loose objects drifted momentarily before settling. "Seal bulkhead 4 Alpha," Rostova commanded, her voice cutting through the cacophony of alarms. "Lena, damage report. Where did they hit us?" "Main cargo access corridor aft section," Lena's voice crackled, strained. "Hull integrity compromised. Atmosphere venting. Second impact near engineering access port side, trying to isolate the breaches. Brick status on borders." Rostova braced herself against the command chair. Brick squinted at his tactical display, the red light glinting off his cybernetic eye. "2 pods attached. Cutting teams active. They're through the outer hull in Sector 4, almost through near engineering." His good hand tightened on the grip of a heavy pulse pistol he'd unholstered. "They work fast." "Captain," a new voice, harsh and carrying easily over the comms even without amplification, reverberated from the direction of the breached corridor. "This is Crow. Your cooperation simplifies things. Resist, and we dismantle your ship piece by piece, starting with your crew." Quint flinched at the name. Crow, leader of the Nashers. His pronouncement wasn't a boast, it was a statement of intent. Her gaze locked onto the cryobay door, the organs, they knew. "Giant, keep maneuvering," Rostova ordered. "Use the debris field, shake them loose." "Trying, Captain," Giant grunted, wrestling the controls. The ship lurched violently as he threaded it between 2 looming chunks of wreckage. "These scavenged engines, they respond sluggishly." "Brick Quint with me," Rostova snapped, drawing her own sidearm. "We secure the cryobay. Lena, keep those engines burning. If you see a chance to make a run for it, take it." "Aye, Captain." The 3 moved swiftly off the bridge, boots magnetizing to the deck plating with rhythmic clicks. Brick took the lead, his heavy pistol held ready, the mining claw on his other arm whirring softly as it flexed. Quint followed, clutching her datapad, her eyes wide but determined. Rostova brought up the rear, scanning the corridor junctions. The air thickened with the acrid smell of burning insulation and ozone. Sparks showered from a damaged ceiling conduit. The emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows. They reached the intersection leading to the main cargo hold and the adjacent cryobay. The heavy bulkhead door to the breached corridor, 4 Alpha, was visibly buckling inward, glowing red in places from cutting torches. "They're almost through," Brick growled. He raised his pistol. Suddenly, a section of the ceiling ventilation grate exploded downwards in a shower of metal shards. A figure dropped silently, landing in a crouch. Lithe, clad in dark, patched vacuum gear, the figure moved with unsettling speed. It was Nyx. Her face was obscured by a polarized visor, but the predatory poise was unmistakable. She held 2 curved blades, wicked edges gleaming in the red light. "Contact!" Brick yelled, firing his pulse pistol. Nyx dodged with inhuman agility, the energy bolt searing the bulkhead where she'd been a split second before. She flowed across the corridor, blades flashing. Rostova fired her own weapon, forcing Nyx to weave between the shots. From the buckling door, a final screech of tortured metal announced the Nashers' arrival. The door blew inward, revealing Crow. He stood framed in the jagged opening, smoke swirling around him. His scarred face was grim, the red optical sensor glowing balefully. He wore heavy, mismatched armor plating and carried a brutal-looking shotgun built from scavenged parts. Behind him, more figures spilled into the corridor, gnashers armed with crude melee weapons and projectile rifles. "Secure the technician," Crow bellowed, pointing a thick finger towards Quint. "The rest are expendable." The gnashers surged forward. Brick met the first wave, his pulse pistol barking, the heavy mining claw swinging in deadly arcs, crushing armor and bone. He roared, a primal sound of fury, standing his ground like a bulwark. Rostova provided covering fire, her shots precise, forcing the attackers to seek cover behind crates and support beams. "Quint, get the bay sealed." Quint fumbled with the access panel beside the cryo-bay door, her fingers trembling. Security protocols demanded multiple code sequences. The datapad slipped from her grasp, clattering to the deck. She lunged for it, heart hammering. Nick saw her chance. Darting under Brick's guard while he was occupied with two other gnashers, she lunged towards Quint, blades whistling. Rostova intercepted her, parrying a slash with the barrel of her pistol. The force of the blow numbed her arm. Nyx pressed the attack, a whirlwind of motion, her blade seeking any opening. Meanwhile, another figure stepped through the breach behind Crow, moving with a disturbing, fluid grace that contrasted sharply with the brutal efficiency of the other gnashers. This was Severin, the Stitcher. He wore what looked like modified surgical gear, stained and reinforced. Various gleaming, sharp instruments hung from his belt. His eyes, visible behind clear goggles, were devoid of emotion as he surveyed the scene, his gaze lingering unnervingly on Quint. He carried no overt weapon, only his tools. "The doctor first," Severin murmured, his voice soft yet carrying. He began advancing slowly, deliberately, towards Quint, ignoring the firefight around him. Quint finally snatched her datapad, her fingers flying across the screen. Code accepted. Override initiated. The heavy cryo-bay door began to hiss shut with agonizing slowness. Crow raised his shotgun, sighting on Rostova, who was locked in close quarters with Nyx. Before he could fire, Brick bellowed and charged, slamming his cybernetic claw into Crow's side. The Gnasher leader staggered, armor groaning under the impact, but recovered quickly, bringing the butt of his shotgun down hard on Brick's shoulder. The security chief grunted in pain but didn't relent, grappling with Crow amidst the chaos. Severin reached Quint just as the door was halfway closed. He didn't grab her. Instead, his hand darted out, not with a weapon but with a small, syringe-like device. He aimed for her neck. Quint reacted instinctively, throwing herself sideways back against the closing door. The needle hissed past her ear, striking the metal frame. Severin frowned slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. He raised the device again. A pulse bolt struck Severin's shoulder, spinning him around. Lena Petrova stood at the far end of the corridor, smoke curling from the barrel of an emergency pistol. She must have rerouted power and come from engineering. "Get away from her," Lena shouted, her voice shaking but resolute. Severin hissed, clutching his shoulder where the bolt had burned through his gear. He glared at Lena, then back at the nearly sealed cryo-bay door, behind which Quint now scrambled. His moment was lost. With a final, chilling look at Quint, he melted back into the shadows near the breach, disappearing from view as quickly as he had appeared. The cryobay door slammed shut and locked with a heavy thud. Quint slumped against it, gasping for breath, safe for the moment but trapped inside with the precious cargo. The firefight raged on. Brick, though injured, fought savagely against Crow. Rostova, freed from Nix, who had momentarily retreated after Lena's intervention, pushed the remaining Nashers back towards the breach with disciplined fire. Nix reappeared, flanking Lena, forcing the young engineer to dive for cover behind a maintenance panel. Suddenly, the entire ship bucked violently. Alarms screamed louder. "Captain," Giant's voice yelled over the comms. "Massive collision imminent. Bioship fragment trajectory unavoidable. Brace for impact." Crow cursed, disengaging from Brick with a powerful shove. "Nix, Severin, fall back, now." He fired a final defiant shot towards Rostova before turning and scrambling back through the hull breach, the other Nashers following suit. Nix hesitated, glancing towards Lena's cover, then vanished after her leader. "Everyone brace," Rostova yelled, grabbing onto a wall conduit. The world dissolved into violent shaking and the deafening roar of shearing metal. Lights flickered and died, plunging the corridor into absolute darkness for several seconds before the red emergency lights stuttered back on, weaker this time. The Nightingale groaned, a deep, structural agony that promised imminent failure. When the immediate chaos subsided, Rostova pushed herself upright. The corridor was a wreck. Debris floated in the air where gravity plating had failed. Brick lay unmoving near the buckled breech door, his cybernetic arm sparking erratically. Lena was pinned under a heavy ceiling panel, groaning in pain. "Lena, Brick!" Rostova scrambled towards them. From inside the cryobay, Quint banged on the door. "Captain, report. What happened?" Before Rostova could answer, Giant's voice, filled with despair, came over the comm. "Captain, we're crippled. Main engines offline. Life support critical in multiple sectors. We're adrift, deep inside the mold, and they're still attached." On the tactical display, still flickering weakly on a cracked screen, the red icons of the Nasher boarding pods remained firmly clamped to the Nightingale's wounded hull. They hadn't been shaken loose. They were just waiting. Chapter 3: Labyrinth of Rot. Darkness pressed in, broken only by the erratic pulse of emergency lights and the weak beams of handheld torches. The air was cold, thin, tasting of metal dust and something else. Something damp and organic, the pervasive scent of the mold itself seeping through compromised seals. The Nightingale drifted, a wounded animal caught in a vast, predatory web. Rostova knelt beside Brick. He was unconscious, breathing shallowly. His cybernetic arm was mangled, wires spilling from torn casings, useless. Lena was conscious, trapped beneath the fallen panel, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle. "Easy, Lena," Rostova murmured, assessing the situation. The panel was heavy structural plating. "Can you feel your toes?" Lena grimaced, her face pale in the torchlight. "Pins and needles, mostly numb. Captain, the Nashers." "They're waiting," Rostova confirmed grimly. "The collision probably damaged their pods too. We're stuck together for now." She activated her comm. "Quint status." "Secure," Quint's voice replied, muffled through the thick door. "Cryo unit functional. Can you open the door from your side?" "Negative. Power is intermittent. Trying to override requires stable current we don't have." Rostova shone her light on the mangled door controls. "You'll have to stay put. Conserve your oxygen." "Understood." Quint's voice was strained. Rostova turned her attention back to Lena. "All right, let's get this off you." Working carefully, she tried to find leverage, but the panel wouldn't budge. It was wedged tight. A low growl echoed from the darkness down the corridor leading aft. "Not human." Rostova froze, aiming her torch and pistol in that direction. Nothing visible, just drifting debris and shadows. "Did you hear that?" Lena nodded, eyes wide. "Something moving out there." The ship groaned again, settling. Dust motes danced in the torch beams. The silence that followed felt heavy, watchful. "We need to get Brick and Lena somewhere defensible," Rostova decided. "The bridge has auxiliary life support and reinforced doors. Giant, can you monitor internal sensors from the cockpit?" "Barely, Captain," Giant's voice crackled back. "Most sensor arrays are offline or giving ghost readings. Power fluctuations are hell, I see. Heat signatures, near engineering, faint. Could be residual, could be them." "Or something else," Rostova muttered. "The mold wasn't just home to scavengers." "All right, I need leverage." She scanned the debris-strewn corridor. Her eyes landed on a length of bent support strut. Grunting with effort, she managed to pry it loose. Using it as a lever, she strained against the panel pinning Lena. Metal creaked. "It's moving," Lena gasped. With a final heave, Rostova shifted the panel enough for Lena to drag her injured leg free. She cried out, biting back a sob of pain. Rostova helped her sit up, quickly examining the leg. Badly broken, possibly compound. "We need the medkit from the bridge," Rostova said. "Can you stand? Lean on me." Supporting Lena, Rostova turned back to Brick. Getting his dead weight to the bridge would be hard. As she considered the problem, a flickering movement caught her eye near the ceiling, deeper in the aft corridor. She raised her torch beam. Coils of thick black cable, like grotesque vines, detached themselves from the shadows around a damaged conduit junction. They weren't just hanging. They were moving, writhing slowly, deliberately. Multiple strands converged, weaving together, extruding smaller, searching tendrils tipped with frayed connectors that sparked intermittently. It looked disturbingly like a multi-headed serpent made of wires and malice. The cable hydra. "Giant," Rostova whispered into the comm, keeping her voice low. "We have an environmental hazard. Corridor 4, aft section, looks like sentient cabling." "Sentient?" Giant sounded bewildered. "Captain, the mold plays tricks." "This isn't a trick," Rostova insisted. The central mass of the hydra shifted, thicker cables tightening like muscles. It seemed to sense their presence, the faint electrical signals from their torches and comms. One long tendril snaked lower, probing the deck plating near where Brick lay. "We have to move." "Now," Rostova said urgently. She helped Lena hop on her good leg, supporting most of her weight. "Grab Brick's arm, we drag him." It was slow, agonizing work. Lena gasped with pain at every jolt. Rostova strained, pulling Brick's inert form while keeping one eye on the advancing cable hydra. The tendrils moved with unnatural fluidity, flowing over debris, testing surfaces. One brushed against a sparking panel, absorbing the energy with a visible ripple. They reached the intersection leading back to the bridge. The hydra flowed into the junction behind them, blocking the path aft. It seemed to pulse, emitting a low-frequency hum that vibrated through the deck. Suddenly, a section of the hydra lashed out, faster than seemed possible. It wasn't aiming for them, but for Brick's sparking cybernetic arm. The tendrils wrapped around the damaged limb, and the sparks intensified, flowing into the hydra. Brick's body convulsed violently. "Leave him," Lena cried, panicked. Rostova hesitated for only a second. She couldn't leave him. She fired her pulse pistol at the cables wrapped around Brick's arm. The energy bolts dissipated against the thick insulation with minimal effect. The hydra retracted slightly, pulling Brick further into its mass. Its central core glowed brighter. From a side corridor near the engineering access where the second boarding party had breached, a figure emerged silently from the shadows. Nyx. She watched the scene, motionless for a moment, her polarized visor reflecting the hydra's glow. Then she raised a hand, signaling deeper into the darkness behind her. Kral and Severin appeared, along with two other Nashers. They moved cautiously, weapons ready, their attention divided between Rostova and the pulsating cable hydra consuming Brick. "Well, well," Kral's harsh voice echoed. "Looks like the mold provides its own entertainment and softens up the targets." Severin's gaze, however, wasn't on Brick or the hydra. It was fixed on Lena's injured leg, a flicker of clinical interest in his eyes. "Captain," Giant's voice was urgent over the comm. "Multiple life signs converging on your position. Nashers." Rostova was trapped. The hydra blocked the way aft, consuming Brick. Nashers blocked the path to engineering. Lena was injured. The bridge was their only hope, but getting there meant getting past Kral. "Cover me," Rostova yelled, shoving Lena towards the bridge corridor. She turned, raising her pistol towards Kral. Nyx reacted instantly, darting forward, not towards Rostova, but towards the hydra. She moved low and fast, pulling something from her belt, a small device with protruding electrodes. With incredible speed, she jammed it into a junction box near the hydra's base. The cable hydra convulsed violently. Arcs of energy erupted from its core. The tendrils flailed wildly, releasing Brick's body, which slumped to the deck. The hydra seemed disoriented, its movements becoming erratic as it lashed out blindly, striking sparks off the bulkheads. Kral looked surprised, then furious. "Nyx, what are you doing?" Nyx ignored him, using the distraction to melt back into the shadows of the engineering corridor. Had she saved them, or just created chaos? Rostova didn't wait to find out. "Now, Lena." She grabbed Brick under the arms again, dragging him with renewed urgency towards the bridge corridor. Lena hopped frantically beside her. Kral snarled, raising his shotgun. Severin stepped forward, intercepting his aim. "The organs, Kral, the priority." His voice was calm but insistent. "The doctor is likely still secure. Wasting ammunition here is counterproductive. Let the mold weaken them further. Kral hesitated, glancing from the retreating figures of Rostova and Lena to the still spasming cable Hydra, then back towards the cryo-bay's general direction. He lowered his weapon slightly. Fine. Seal this section. We'll find another way to the doctor. Let them bleed in the dark. He gestured, and the Nashers began dragging debris to barricade the corridor leading to the bridge. Rostova and Lena stumbled through the bridge hatch just as the Nashers slammed a heavy metal plate across the corridor behind them. Giant quickly sealed the bridge door from the inside, the locks chunking heavily into place. They collapsed onto the bridge deck, gasping for air. Brick lay unconscious between them. Lena cradled her mangled leg. The bridge was relatively intact, auxiliary power providing dim lighting and basic life support. The main view screen showed only static and the occasional horrifying glimpse of drifting wreckage outside. "We're trapped," Giant whispered, his face pale. Rostova pushed herself up, checking Brick's pulse. Still there. Weak. She found the medkit and began working on Lena's leg, cleaning the wound, applying antiseptic, and preparing a stabilizing splint. "Not trapped. Fortified," Rostova corrected, her voice tight but controlled. "We have temporary shelter. We have auxiliary life support. We need to assess our options." "Options?" Giant laughed bitterly. "We're dead in the water. They're outside the door. That thing is down the hall. Quint is locked in the bay. What options?" Rostova finished splinting Lena's leg, securing it tightly. "The cryo unit has its own independent power source. Quint is safe as long as that holds. The Nashers want the organs intact. They won't risk damaging the bay excessively. Brick needs medical attention we can't provide here. Lena needs proper care." She paused, looking at the static-filled view screen. "There might be one option. Risky. Desperate." She accessed the ship's internal schematics on a secondary console, bypassing damaged systems. She pointed to a narrow access tunnel indicated near the bridge's rear bulkhead. "Maintenance crawlspace J12. It bypasses the main corridors, leads directly to the secondary environmental controls adjacent to the cryo bay." Lena frowned. "That crawlspace hasn't been used in years. It's probably unpressurized, full of debris." "And likely unguarded," Rostova finished. "If I can get through, I can reach Quint. Maybe we can reroute power locally, get the main door open, consolidate here." "And then what?" Giant asked. "Fight our way out with one functioning security chief and a crippled engineer." "One step at a time, pilot," Rostova said. "First step, reach Quint." She looked at the crawlspace access panel, small, bolted shut. Getting through the narrow, dark tunnels filled with unknown hazards would be harrowing, and she'd be alone. Suddenly, Quint's voice came over the comm, frantic. "Captain, something," trying to get in. Not the main door, from the vents, scratching, cutting sounds. Rostova's blood ran cold. The Nashers weren't just waiting. They were already finding another way. Chapter 4: Severed Ties. The scratching sound intensified, echoing tinny and sharp over the comm from Quint's position. Metal screeched against metal. It wasn't the brute force assault on the main door. This was insidious, probing. "Quint, report." Rostova snapped into her comm, already moving towards the J-12 access panel. What do you see? Nothing. It's coming from inside the ventilation shaft above the main cryo unit. Small access grate. They're cutting through it. Quint's voice trembled, betraying her terror despite her attempt at control. The unit is right below it. They wouldn't risk hitting the container, Rostova reasoned mostly to herself. Too valuable. Unless it wasn't Krau's main force. Unless it was someone. Smaller, more agile. Someone like Nix. Or perhaps Severin applying his precise destructive skills. Giant, cover the door, Rostova ordered, grabbing a plasma cutter from the emergency locker. Lena, monitor comms. Keep talking to Quint. Keep her focused. Aye, Captain, Lena acknowledged, her face tight with pain and worry. She keyed her comm. Ilara, talk to me. Describe the sound exactly. Rostova activated the plasma cutter. The tool hummed to life, casting a harsh white glare. She began slicing through the bolts securing the J-12 panel. Sparks showered, illuminating the grim determination set on her face. Each second felt critical. The scratching from Quint's end seemed to grow louder, more frantic. It's rhythmic, Quint reported, her voice strained. Like sawing, almost through. I can see sparks falling near the unit's casing. The final bolt gave way. Rostova wrenched the panel open, revealing a dark, narrow void choked with bundled cables and dust. The air inside was stale, cold. No telling what waited within. She strapped a spare oxygen tank to her belt and clipped a powerful torch beside her pistol. Going in, Rostova announced. Maintain calm silence unless urgent. Don't want to broadcast my position. She gave Giant a final nod and squeezed into the oppressive blackness of the crawlspace. Inside, the space was barely wide enough for her shoulders. Progress was slow, forcing her to crawl over thick bundles of conduits and sharp-edged structural supports. Dust choked the air, disturbed by her movement. Her torch beam cut a shaky path through the darkness, revealing decades of neglect, loose wires, patches of desiccated fungal growth, the occasional unsettling stain of unknown origin. The silence was absolute, amplifying the sound of her own breathing within her helmet and the scuffing of her suit against the metal. She navigated by the faded schematic markings stenciled onto the tunnel walls, cross-referencing with the layout memorized from the console. Left at Junction Gamma, right at Delta 9. The tunnel twisted, turned, dropped. At one point, she had to edge sideways through a section partially collapsed, sharp metal fragments tearing at her overalls. Time lost meaning. Was she crawling for minutes? An hour? The silence pressed down, broken only by the distant, phantom groans of the dying ship around her. Was that scratching sound real, or just her imagination amplifying the ship's death throes? Then she heard it, faint but undeniable, ahead and slightly below her position. The rhythmic scraping sound Quint had described. She was close. She extinguished her torch, relying on the faint ambient light filtering through seams and cracks. Edging forward, she reached a vertical shaft lined with grimy ladder rungs. Below her, maybe 10 meters down, the shaft opened onto the ceiling space directly above the cryo bay. And she saw him. Severin. He was suspended upside down from magnetic grapples attached to the ceiling struts, working diligently on the ventilation grate leading into the bay. His movements were economical, precise. He wasn't using a loud cutter, but a fine, high-frequency vibro saw, its low hum barely audible. Sparks showered down onto the gleaming cryo unit below, narrowly missing the delicate control panel. He worked with the detached focus of a surgeon, utterly absorbed in his task. Rostova drew her pistol, aiming carefully. A clean shot was difficult from this angle, through the tangle of pipes and wires. Hitting Severin might cause him to drop onto the cryo unit, potentially damaging it. A miss could ricochet unpredictably. She needed a distraction. Her eyes scanned the cramped space. A loose junction box hung nearby, trailing frayed wires. An idea sparked. Risky but potentially effective. Holding her breath, she carefully maneuvered her plasma cutter towards the box. She didn't need to cut it, just create an overload. A surge. She touched the cutter to two exposed terminals. A blinding flash erupted, accompanied by a loud crackle. Alarms blared momentarily from a nearby damaged system before dying again. Severin flinched violently, dropping his vibro saw, which clattered harmlessly away into a recess. He twisted, looking up towards the source of the flash, his goggles reflecting the residual sparks. He spotted Rostova instantly. He didn't panic. With chilling speed, he detached one magnetic grapple, swinging himself towards the ladder shaft Rostova occupied. He moved like an insect, unnervingly fast in the zero-G adjusted environment of the crawlspace. From his belt, he drew not a gun, but a long, thin scalpel that glinted sharply. Rostova fired. The pulse bolt hit the strut near Severin's hand, showering him with molten metal flecks. He hissed, recoiling slightly, but kept coming, scrambling up the rungs towards her. There was no room to maneuver, no space to retreat. Rostova fired again, a hasty shot that went wide. Severin was almost upon her, the scalpel held low, aiming for the gaps in her gear, the vulnerable points. Desperate, Rostova kicked out, her boot connecting with Severin's chest. The impact sent him reeling backwards down the shaft, but he arrested his fall instantly by grabbing onto a cable bundle. He launched himself back towards her, scalpel leading. Just as the gleaming tip was inches from her face, another figure appeared from the darkness above Rostova. Nyx. She dropped silently between Rostova and Severin, landing lightly on a conduit. Her curved blades were out, positioned defensively. "Enough, Severin," Nyx's voice was flat, filtered through her helmet calm. "Kral ordered us to secure the asset, not engage in petty duels in the ventilation." Severin paused, hovering in the shaft, his expression unreadable behind his goggles, the scalpel held steady. She interfered. The access point was almost breached. "The doctor remains secure," Nyx countered, "and the captain is needed alive, perhaps. Leverage." She glanced briefly at Rostova, her visor betraying nothing. "Kral is initiating Plan Beta, external breach." Severin lowered his scalpel slightly, considering. "External, risky, could damage the container." "Kral's calculation," Nyx replied curtly. She looked back at Rostova. "Your path ends here, Captain." Ristova didn't trust this. Why would Nix intervene? Was it the flicker of empathy she thought she saw earlier, or just following different orders? Before Ristova could react, a massive explosion rocked the entire section of the ship. Not an internal blast, but something outside, impacting the hull near the cryo bay. The crawl space groaned, dust and debris raining down. External breach initiated, Nick stated calmly, grabbing a strut for stability. Severin pushed past her, scrambling downwards towards the cryo bay ceiling again. If Kral damages the merchandise, he muttered, disappearing from view. Nix turned her full attention to Ristova. Stay out of the way, Captain. Your fight might be over sooner than you think. She didn't attack, but simply hung there, blocking the path downwards, her blades held loosely but ready. Ristova felt a cold dread, external breach. Kral was getting impatient, willing to risk everything. She had to reach Quint. She looked at Nix, a silent question in her eyes. Why help her? Why stop Severin? Nix seemed to understand the unspoken query. Survival in the mold requires adjustments, she said cryptically. Severin forgets the ecosystem. Kral forgets caution. I remember. She gestured vaguely back the way Ristova had come. Go back to your bridge. Your fate isn't here. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered violently. Trusting Nix felt insane. But fighting her seemed equally suicidal, and staying put meant letting Kral potentially destroy the cryo unit. Ristova made her choice. With a final, wary look at the enigmatic mold diver, she began the arduous crawl back towards the bridge, the sounds of Kral's external assault echoing through the ship's dying structure. Every meter felt like a kilometer, the uncertainty of what she was returning to gnawing at her. Had she just abandoned Quint? Or had Nix offered the only path to survival, however slim? The answer waited in the blood-red emergency lighting of the bridge. Chapter 5. Fractured Hull, Fractured Loyalties. Ristova emerged from the J-12 crawlspace hatch like a spelunker surfacing from the abyss, covered in grime and smelling of stale, metallic air. The bridge was chaos, illuminated by the strobing red emergency lights and the sparks showering from a cracked console near Giant Station. The explosions had taken their toll. Giant wrestled with unresponsive controls, his face grim. Portside hull integrity failing. We're venting atmosphere faster now, Captain. Auxiliary power is draining fast. Lena lay propped against the bulkhead, her face pale, clutching the medkit. Brick was still unconscious, his breathing ragged. The deck vibrated constantly from the ship's deepening distress. Quint, Ristova demanded, pulling off her helmet and oxygen mask. Still here, Quint's voice crackled over the comm, sounding thin and distant. The explosions, they stopped, but the outer hull near the bay is buckled. Severin got the vent grate open just before the last blast, but he pulled back, I think. Nix recalled him. Ristova processed this. Nix intervening again. It made no sense unless the Nashers were fracturing internally. Did he get inside the bay? Negative. He only breached the ceiling space above. The main container is untouched, but, Captain, the temperature regulation is fluctuating. Those impacts must have damaged the external power conduits. This was bad, extremely bad. The organs required absolute temperature stability. Fluctuations could render them useless within hours. Can you access manual overrides locally? Rostova asked urgently. Trying, interface is sluggish, damage is extensive. Quint's voice was tight with effort. Rostova moved to the engineering console, trying to assess the ship-wide damage. Red icons littered the schematic. Life support failing in multiple decks. Structural integrity warnings flashing critical in the entire aft section. Main power core offline. They were running on fumes. Nashers, Rostova asked Jayan. Sensors are shot to hell, Jayan replied, slamming a fist onto the console in frustration. But I'm not picking up active cutting anymore. Their pods are still clamped on, though. Maybe the explosions damaged them too. Or maybe. He trailed off as a new alarm blared. A proximity warning from one of the few functioning external sensors. What is it? Rostova demanded. Something big, Jayan breathed, eyes wide pointing at the flickering viewscreen. Through the static and debris, a shape resolved itself. Not a Nasher pod, not ship wreckage. It was vast, biological, and horrifyingly familiar. A section of the ship mold itself seemed to be, moving towards them. A colossal tendril kilometers long composed of fused bioship hulls, fungal growths, and writhing cables was slowly, deliberately extending from the main mass of the necropolis. Drawn by the explosions, by the Nightingale's leaking energy signatures. Is that, Lena whispered, horrified. Mold migration, Rostova said grimly. Large-scale environmental shift, sometimes triggered by energy releases it consumes. The colossal tendril wasn't just drifting. It was reaching, pulsing with faint, sickly light. Smaller offshoots, like probing fingers the size of freight containers, detached and moved towards the crippled Nightingale. We need to get out of here, Jayan stated the obvious, his voice bordering on panic. Now. We have no main engines, pilot, Rostova reminded him sharply, forcing calm into her own voice. Options. There's one possibility, Lena said, her voice weak but clear. She pointed a trembling finger at the engineering schematic. The emergency maneuvering thrusters. They run on independent chemical fuel cells. Limited bursts designed for orbital adjustments, not sustained flight. Can they break us free from the Nasher pods and give us enough push to escape that thing? Rostova asked. Maybe, Lena admitted, but the control relays run through the aft section, the part that's showing critical failure. I'd have to bypass the main junction manually, go out there. She glanced down at her splinted leg, which I can't do. I can, Rostova said immediately. It was a suicide mission, heading into the most damaged part of the ship, but it was the only chance. Jayan, prepare the thruster ignition sequence on my mark. Monitor that. Tendril, give me proximity updates. Captain, you can't, Lena started. No choice, Lena. Rostova checked her pulse pistol's charge, grabbed a spare oxygen tank and headed for the bridge door. Keep Quint updated. Try to stabilize Brick. Just as she reached the door, a grinding sound came from the corridor outside. Not cutting this time. Something heavy being dragged away. The barricade. Giant aimed his own sidearm at the door. Their back. The heavy metal plate the Nashers had used to block the corridor screeched as it was pulled aside. Silence followed. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Kral appeared in the doorway. He looked battered, his armor scorched, the red light of his optical sensor flickering erratically. He held his shotgun loosely, but his eyes burned with cold fury. Behind him, Severin stood impassively, his surgical gear smeared with grime, holding his scalpel. Two other Nashers flanked them, looking nervous. Nix was conspicuously absent. "The mold itself comes for your wreck, Captain," Kral rasped, his voice rougher than before. "Seems fate has decided this for us, but the cargo is ours." "You'll destroy it trying to take it," Rostova countered, standing her ground, pistol aimed squarely at Kral's chest. "Perhaps," Kral conceded, "but leaving it means certain destruction for all of us when that biomass hits, a calculated risk." He gestured towards the cryobay direction. "Severin requires the doctor's assistance. Cooperation ensures quicker processing." Severin's eyes flickered towards Lena, then settled on Rostova. The implication was chillingly clear. "We have functioning emergency thrusters," Rostova bluffed, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "We can still get clear." Kral laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "With half your ship venting into the void, with my pod still clamped to your hull, your engines won't overcome our mass." "Maybe not yours," Rostova replied, her gaze flicking past him. "But the mold waits for no one." At that moment a low groan shuddered through the deck. Not the ship this time. It came from behind Kral. Brick Cole was stirring. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. His one good hand twitched. Kral glanced back, dismissing Brick as irrelevant. It was a mistake. Brick's eyes cleared, focusing on the Nasher leader standing over his captain. With a surge of adrenaline fueled by pure protective instinct, Brick lunged. He wasn't aiming for Kral, but for the damaged controls on the wall near the door. The manual lock override Giant had engaged. His fingers slammed down on the panel. Sparks flew. The bridge door, already compromised, screeched and slammed shut with violent force, separating Rostova, Giant, Lena, and the waking Brick from Kral and his men in the corridor. Alarms blared as the emergency lock engaged again, likely fused into place this time. Kral roared in fury, pounding on the reinforced transparasteel viewport set in the door. "Trapped like rats." "Brick," Rostova rushed to his side. He was conscious, but barely. "Had to," Brick mumbled, pain etched on his face. "Captain," Giant shouted, pointing at the view screen. "The tendril, it's accelerating. Impact in 5 minutes." 5 minutes, trapped on the bridge, thrusters useless without the manual bypass. Nashers right outside the door, undoubtedly working to cut their way back in. The cryo unit failing. "Ilara," Lena yelled into the comm. "Status." Quint's reply was fragmented, filled with static and panic. "Can't stabilize. Hull groaning. Severin is outside the viewport. Watching." Rostova looked at the sparking door controls Brick had hit, then at the crawlspace hatch. An idea, born of sheer desperation, formed. The crawlspace led to environmental controls near the bay. Environmental controls meant access to certain ship systems bypassed by the bridge damage, including, potentially, localized atmospheric or coolant venting. "Giant," Rostova said, her voice deadly calm. "Can you reroute the remaining auxiliary power to the external docking clamps holding the Nasher pods?" Giant frowned, his fingers flying. "Maybe drain everything else." "Why?" "Severin is outside Quint's viewport," Rostova explained grimly. "Let's give him a surprise." She turned to Lena. "And prepare those thrusters. If this works, we might only have one shot." She grabbed her helmet and cutter again, moving towards the J-12 hatch. Time had run out. It was time for the final, desperate gamble. Chapter 6: Void Sacrifice. The crawl space felt different this time. The ship's groans were louder, more frequent. The constant vibration threatened to shake loose already precarious debris. Rostova moved with desperate speed, ignoring the scrapes and impacts, focused solely on reaching the environmental control junction near the cryo bay. The air in her suit felt thin, recycled too many times. "Giant status," she grunted into her comm, wedging herself past a buckled conduit. "Tendril closing fast, 3 minutes to impact." Giant's voice was strained. "Kral's team is cutting through the bridge door, almost there. Auxiliary power rerouted to docking clamps, holding for your command." "Ilara," Rostova called. Static, then Quint's voice, barely a whisper. "He's right outside, Severin," tapping on the viewport glass. Rostova reached the junction, a cramped node where multiple conduits and control panels converged. Through a small, grimy service window, she could just glimpse the outer curve of the cryo bay wall, mere meters away. She located the environmental controls for the exterior hull section, specifically, the emergency coolant vents used for rapid heat dispersal during atmospheric entry. They vented directly adjacent to the docking clamps. "Giant, prepare to release clamps on my mark," Rostova ordered, finding the manual override lever for the vents. It was stiff, rusted. She braced herself, putting all her weight into it. "Lena, ignition sequence primed." "Primed, Captain," Lena confirmed, her voice tight. "Ilara," Rostova said, her voice low and intense. "Get away from the viewport, now." She took a deep breath. "Giant, release clamps now." "Clamps releasing." Simultaneously, Rostova threw the lever for the coolant vents. With a deafening roar that resonated even through the hull, supercooled gas erupted from the vents directly onto the Nasher boarding pods just as their magnetic locks disengaged. Metal screamed under the thermal shock. Ice instantly sheeted the pods and the surrounding hull. Through the service window, Rostova saw Severin recoil from the cryo bay viewport as the blast hit. One of the Nasher pods, its structure critically weakened by the thermal stress, ripped free from the hull entirely, tumbling away into the void towards the approaching mold tendril. The second pod, containing Kral and his remaining men, fractured but held on for a crucial second longer, engines sputtering uselessly as ice choked their systems. "Lena, thrusters, full burn," Rostova yelled. "Firing." The Nightingale shuddered violently as the emergency thrusters ignited. It wasn't a smooth acceleration, but a series of brutal, jarring shoves. The crippled ship lurched away from the remaining, ice-encrusted Nasher pod. Kral's furious face was visible for a moment through the pod's viewport before it too was left behind, adrift directly in the path of the colossal mold tendril. "Are we clear?" Rostova gasped, watching the monstrous biomass fill the service window's view. Thrusters firing, velocity increasing. Slowly, Giant reported, but the tendril, it's faster. The Nightingale strained, bleeding atmosphere, shedding pieces of its damaged hull. The mold tendril loomed, impossibly large, its surface a horrifying landscape of fused metal, pulsating sacs and grasping appendages. Collision seemed inevitable. "More power, Lena," Giant pleaded. "That's all she's got," Lena cried back. On the bridge, Brick, somehow finding a last reserve of strength, reached over and slammed his good fist onto the main console where the weapons systems flickered intermittently. "Forward cannon, manual charge," he wheezed. The ship's remaining laser cannon, sluggishly, began to power up. "Brick, no, it'll drain everything," Giant shouted. "Got to." Brick slumped back unconscious again, but his action had initiated the firing sequence. The cannon fired. A single, brilliant lance of energy stabbed into the approaching mold tendril. It wasn't enough to destroy it, barely enough to inconvenience it, but it struck a large, volatile-looking sac near the tip. The sac ruptured in a silent, blossoming explosion of phosphorescent gas and biological matter. The explosion's shockwave, rippling through the void, hit the Nightingale. It didn't damage it further, but it gave it the smallest, almost imperceptible nudge. A nudge that deflected its trajectory just enough. The ship scraped past the main tendril, close enough for Rostova to see horrifying details of its surface through the service window, gaping maws, sightless eyes embedded in fungal plates, remnants of consumed ships fused into its structure. Secondary appendages grasped, tearing away more of the Nightingale's hull plating, but the main impact was avoided. They were through. "Status," Rostova demanded, pulling herself back from the window, heart pounding. We're clear of the main mass," Giant stammered, disbelief in his voice. "Thrusters sputtering, fuel near empty. We're adrift again, but clear." "Yalara." "Alive," Quint's voice came back, stronger now. "Hull is breached near the viewport, sealed it with emergency foam. Temperature is dropping again, but slower, I think. I think the organs might be viable if we get help soon." Rostova began the slow crawl back to the bridge. The adrenaline was fatting, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and the crushing weight of their situation. They were alive, clear of the mold's embrace for now, the Nashers seemingly dealt with. But they were crippled, bleeding air, low on power, with failing life support and critical injuries, drifting in the void miles from any shipping lane. Reaching the bridge, she found Giant slumped over the helm, exhausted but alert. Lena was tending to Brick, who remained unconscious. The bridge was battered but holding. The main view screen showed the receding horror of the ship mold, a silent, swirling graveyard in the distance. "Damage report," Rostova said quietly, collapsing into the command chair. "Extensive," Giant replied wearily. "Life support can maybe hold for 12 hours if we conserve everything. No main power, no long-range comms. Subspace antenna is gone. Emergency beacon is active, but the signal is weak. Fuel for thrusters, gone. 12 hours, maybe. A slow death sentence in the cold dark. Quint's voice came over the comm again. Captain, I've stabilized the cryo unit temperature for now, rerouted power locally, but it won't hold indefinitely. Rostova looked at her crew, Jayan staring bleakly into the void, Lena tending bravely to Brick despite her own pain. Brick, who had sacrificed his last strength for them. Quint, isolated but fighting for the cargo that had cost them so much. Was it worth it? The organs might survive, but would they? She activated the ship-wide comm, her voice hoarse but steady. This is Captain Rostova. We survived the mold. We evaded the Nashers. The cost was high. Our ship is crippled. Our situation is precarious. She paused, gathering her strength. But we are alive. The cargo is secure. We activated the emergency beacon. Now, we wait, conserve power, conserve air. We wait for rescue. That's all we can do. Silence answered her. The hum of failing life support, the distant creak of stressed metal, the vast, indifferent silence of space. They had entered the necropolis seeking a shortcut, chasing time. They had found only horror, desperation, and loss. Survival was not guaranteed. It was merely postponed. Floating in the darkness, surrounded by the ghosts of dead ships and the memory of the mold, the crew of the Nightingale could only wait. Hopping their faint beacon reached someone before the void claimed them completely. The price of passage through the ship mold was steep, paid in metal, blood, and time that was rapidly running out. Chapter 7: Fatting Signals. Time bled away in the cold, cramped confines of the Nightingale's bridge. Hours passed, marked only by the slow dimming of the already weak emergency lights and the increasingly ragged cycling of the life support system. Condensation, freezing in places, slicked the bulkheads. The air grew heavy, stale, carrying the metallic tang of failing scrubbers and the underlying scent of fear. Rostova sat rigid in the command chair, forcing herself to stay awake, rationing the last of the stimulant patches from the medkit. Her eyes burned from fatigue, scanning the near-dead consoles, searching for any flicker of hope, any change in the void outside displayed on the main screen, a screen that showed only indifferent stars and the distant, ominous smudge of the ship mold. They hadn't drifted far. Jayan slumped at the pilot station, occasionally running diagnostics that invariably returned errors or bleak status reports. The emergency beacon icon pulsed weakly on his display, a tiny green heartbeat in a sea of red warnings. He hadn't spoken much in the last hour, his earlier despair settling into a grim, silent resignation. Lena shivered under a thin emergency blanket near Brick's still form. Her splinted leg throbbed mercilessly, the dwindling supply of painkillers offering little relief. She had tried futilely to bypass damaged relays or coax more power from the dying cells, her technical expertise only serving to confirm the hopelessness of their situation. Brick's breathing was shallower now, his skin clammy despite the dropping temperature. He hadn't regained consciousness. Ilara, Rostova spoke into the comm, her voice raspy. Status. A pause filled with static hiss. Then Quint's voice, weak but audible, temperature holding, just barely. Cryo unit is icing over externally. Power fluctuations. Getting worse. How long, Captain? Rostova didn't answer immediately. She looked at the chronometer. 8 hours since escaping the mold's grasp. Life support reserves estimated less than 4 remaining. Air quality degrading rapidly. The beacon is still active, Doctor. We wait. It felt like a lie even as she said it. Fuel cell C is depleted, Lena reported quietly, pointing at a flickering gauge on the engineering console. Auxiliary power output dropping another 5%. Divert remaining power from non-essential lighting, Rostova ordered. We need life support and the beacon above all else. Several already dim lights flickered out, plunging corners of the bridge into deeper shadow. The hum of the environmental systems lowered in pitch, struggling. Giant suddenly straightened, leaning towards his console. Wait, signal disturbance, faint could be, interference. Restova was instantly alert. Source. Unknown, broad spectrum, not a standard comm signal, more like energy buildup. He frantically tried to refine the sensor reading the damaged systems fighting him. Bearing 310 Mark 5, distance, indeterminate, it's weak. Hope, treacherous and unwelcome, flickered in Restova's chest. Could it be a ship? A rescue vessel homing in on their beacon? Boost gain on the external sensors. Focus everything on that bearing. Trying, Giant grunted, coaxing the dying console. Signal is odd, pulsing, not like any drive signature I recognize. Lena pushed herself up slightly. Could it be residual energy from the mold? A plasma discharge? Maybe, Rostova conceded, keeping her voice level. Don't stop broadcasting, Giant. Keep that beacon squawking. Minutes crawled by. The strange signal fluctuated, sometimes strengthening slightly, sometimes fading into the background noise. It offered no recognizable pattern, no confirmation. Outside, the uncaring stars wheeled past. Brick coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made Lena jump. She quickly checked his pulse, her expression growing more worried. His breathing is worse, Captain. He's running out of time. Rostova knew. They all were. She looked from Brick's pale face to the pulsing beacon icon, then back to the perplexing signal on Giant's screen. A gamble, a terrible one. Giant, she said slowly, can we send a directed energy pulse using the comm array? Drain the last reserves, focus everything into one tight beam towards that signal's origin. Giant looked horrified. Captain, that would drain everything. Life support, the beacon itself. If it's not rescue, we'd be signing our death warrant. If it is rescue, it might be the only way they pinpoint us through the background radiation this close to the mold, Rostova argued. And if it's not, what difference does another hour or two make? Lena stared at Rostova, understanding dawning in her eyes. You think it's our only chance? It's a chance, Rostova corrected. A slim one, but waiting guarantees failure. Life support is failing. Brick is dying. Ilara's unit is on borrowed time. She met Giant's gaze. Your call, pilot. You're the comms expert. Giant looked at the dying bridge around him, at Lena's pained face, at Brick's still form. He swallowed hard, his knuckles white where he gripped the console. Okay. Okay, Captain, rerouting power, charging the main emitter. This will take everything we have left. We get one shot. The remaining lights dimmed further. The life support fans sputtered, cycling down to a near-silent whisper. Warning klaxons, muted by the low power, began to chime weakly. The bridge grew noticeably colder. "Ilara," Rostova said into the calm, "we're attempting a focused transmission. Power will likely fail completely afterwards. The cryo unit, it will lose external power." A longer pause this time, then Quint's voice laced with a strange calmness. "Understood, Captain, the internal batteries. Might give it a few more minutes. Good luck." "Emitter charged," Giant announced, his voice barely audible. "Targeting signal origin, firing. Now." He pressed the command sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a deep hum vibrated through the deck as the comm array drew the last dregs of power. The lights went out completely, plunging the bridge into absolute blackness, save for the faint emergency glow from a few isolated indicators and the chronometer display. The life support system fell silent. Silence. Utter, complete silence, except for their own ragged breathing in the cold dark. "Signal sent," Giant whispered into the blackness. "Beacon is offline, life support. Gone, we're running on emergency suit air now." Rostova activated her helmet's internal light, casting a weak beam. Lena did the same. They looked at each other, the reality of their gamble settling upon them. They had thrown their last dice. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The cold deepened, biting through their suits. Ice formed thick on the view screen. Brick's breathing grew terrifyingly faint. "Anything?" Rostova asked, her voice tight. Giant stared at the dead console. "Nothing. Sensors are completely dark. We're blind." Despair, cold and final, washed over Rostova. She had made the wrong call, sacrificed their last few hours for a phantom signal. She closed her eyes, listening to the faint rasp of Brick's breathing, waiting for it to stop. Suddenly, a flicker of light from outside. Not an explosion. A steady white light cutting through the darkness, illuminating the ice-covered viewport. Then another, blue this time. Giant scrambled towards the viewport, wiping frantically at the ice on the inside. "Lights! Ship lights! Bearing 310, it's a vessel." Rostova's heart leaped. She moved to the viewport beside him, peering out. A ship, sleek and unfamiliar, hung in the void not more than a kilometer away, its searchlights sweeping towards the derelict Nightingale. It wasn't a standard freighter or patrol ship. Its design was angular, almost military, but bearing no recognizable insignia. They saw the pulse, Lena breathed, tears mixing with the grime on her face. They saw it. The ship outside flashed its running lights in a standard recognition pattern. Rescue. Against all odds, rescue. Rostova felt an overwhelming wave of relief, so potent it almost buckled her knees. She keyed her helmet comm, hopping its short-range function still worked. "This is Captain Eva Rostova of the medical transport Nightingale. We read you. Request immediate medical assistance. Critical injuries aboard." A pause, then a voice crackled back, clear and professional, blessedly free of static. "Nightingale, this is Search and Rescue Vessel Pathfinder. We read you 5 by 5. Acknowledged medical emergency. Preparing docking tube and medevac team. Stand by. They had made it. Rostova leaned her forehead against the freezing transparasteel, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They had faced the mold, battled the gnashers, endured the failing ship, and survived. But as the Pathfinder maneuvered closer, its docking lights illuminating the Nightingale's battered hull, a final chill touched Rostova, colder than the void outside. The organs. Had they survived the final power loss? Was Quinn all right? Had the sacrifice been worth the cost? The rescue was here, but the final tally of their passage through the great orbital necropolis was yet to be counted. Their ordeal was over, but the scars, visible and unseen, would remain. The end.